And so the Housing Authority is here to give us an update.
Good evening.
Great. So maybe you could tell us about the relocation of the North Washington and the Greenburgh and Greenville Circle. Those are the two, most important ones at this point.
Good evening, town board members. So the scattered sites redevelopment, we started off with North Washington Avenue, where we had approximately or exactly 12 families there to be relocated. So notices were given, and the 90-day notice expired on June 30th. We relocated all the residents from North Washington Avenue to in the vicinity of town of Greenburgh itself. Some of them were relocated to Elmsford neighborhood. A couple of the residents were relocated to the federal sites. A couple of them were relocated to the state site. So all the residents, and one resident actually was relocated to the old White Plains Road site. So we have. Yeah. So all the residents at North Washington have been relocated. They're all relocated in the town of Greenburgh.
Could you maybe talk outside, because we have a meeting. Murray, could we maybe yell and scream outside?
Okay, and tell them you don't want to go.
We really, Murray, we have a meeting. We can't be interrupted, and people are watching this on TV.
Residents who wanted to permanently relocate, they chose to relocate, and Rose from Housing Action Council worked with them to make sure that we help them in all the matters. If Rose want to add anything else to that, you're most welcome. Okay, Greenville Circle, we have sent out the 90-day notices. It is around July 15th we had sent them out. We have approximately 15 families there. 2 of the families are relocating permanently. Rose is working with every family there to make sure that we relocate them temporarily to units in the town of Greenburgh itself.
So everything that people have said, like in Black Westchester, that people are moving into Mount Vernon and Yonkers, and they're being displaced, and the kids are not going to be going are so far away from the school district. That's all inaccurate.
Yes, we'd like Rose to address that, if you might.
Okay, as most of you know, I'm Rose Noonan. I'm the Executive Director of Housing Action Council, and our office is the relocation coordinator for this development. As Raju was saying, that there are 5 federal sites, as probably you know, and so who we have worked with on those sites are most intensively are those who reside at the North Washington site and also at the Greenville site. So of those residents, all with the exception of those who chose to move outside permanently,
Chose voluntarily.
chose voluntarily, yes. They have decided they do not wish to return after the renovations are complete. But all those who expressed interest in moving temporarily and then returning to the site are temporarily housed in the town of Greenburgh, either in 2 privately owned developments in Greenburgh, or in the vacant units in the state site or in the federal site. And that is also our plan for Greenville. The Greenville residents received a notice that the 90-day notice, the date for moving would have been around October 11th. I believe that's the date in the 90-day notice. Some of the residents have chosen to move permanently, and we have been working with them, and there's moves going on right now as they've made that choice. We have I'll say a pool of temporary units in those federal sites, state sites, and in the 2 privately owned developments. And so we will be, I don't like to use this word, but sort of rotating people as construction is completed at one site, then those who wish to return will return, say, to the North Washington site, and then residents who are in the Greenville site will move into those temporary units. And will continue to use that pool of temporary units throughout the construction of the entire development. We have projected dates when construction will be complete. We know construction varies a little bit, but the contractor assures us he's on schedule, and so he will complete some of the North Washington site units beginning in early November. And we're now looking sort of at our matrix of what the needs are in terms of bedroom sizes, where children are going to school, and within the next week or so, we'll be able to tell the Greenville residents that these particular units are available. Some are still thinking about, are they going to move do they want to move elsewhere? And so we are providing them lists of available apartments. In the I would say the greater Greenburgh area, and sometimes those listings, of which there might have been 10, 20 or so forth, would have something that was available in Yonkers, would have something available in Mount Vernon, but it's their choice as to whether they're interested in it. As you all well know, that rents are high. Rents for 3, 4, and 5 bedroom apartments are extremely high, and the availability of them is scarce. So if opportunities want to be taken advantage in those markets, people need to act quickly. So we continue to provide listings, and if someone expresses an interest, we help them follow up with that listing. But again, that's different than our temporary pool of apartments, which is a contained number. We can expand it, we can contract it if need be through the construction phases.
Right now, when you're saying people are moving out voluntarily, could anybody say, because I'm trying to anticipate, say, what will be, say, Black Westchester, could anybody make an accusation that we're like encouraging people to, not to come back, or is this something that people will say, I just don't want to have the hassle of constantly moving? Are we like encouraging people, not to come back, or are they sort of totally voluntarily, without any prodding, deciding not to come back?
Well, I would let Rose answer that, but I'd simply say that even though there is no HUD regulation or rule that the residents would be allowed to come back, the Greenburgh Housing Authority Board made the decision that all the residents would be able to come back if they so desire to do so. So no one is, to my knowledge, no one is being prodded or encouraged to go elsewhere. It's of their own volition to the extent they choose to do so. But they're certainly welcome to come back as per the board's decision.
Right. And, the other thing, there was an article, I think, in the American Prospect, about, the whole concept right now, not this housing authority, but, what the Greenburgh Housing Authority is doing is happening all over, the nation right now. I'm sort of I'm trying to anticipate, some of the complaints that people, what I've read in the Black Westchester, newspapers and the criticisms. Is it possible that maybe the people who are critics are focusing on the wrong body, because it really, to me, is the federal government that has to provide housing authorities with more funding. And if we had not entered into the agreements with the private sector, the housing authority would have had, could have gone belly up, actually.
Mr. Abraham, do you want to address?
Do you follow what I'm saying? I'm sort of wondering if the focus of attention by activists is misplaced, should be focused more on, say, the federal government for not providing housing authorities with the funding that they need to provide, to maintain buildings. You don't have that much choice, it seems.
Historically, HUD has always underfunded the housing authorities, both on the operating subsidies and on the capital fund. Especially I can talk about Greenburgh Housing Authority, where the last CFP or the capital fund we got was around 2020. It was 240,000. And with 240,000, you cannot even change the roofs at one site. So the capital needs of most of the housing authorities, they run into years and years of backlog, and HUD has no funding for that. On operating funds itself, HUD is only providing us 82% of what our requirements are. So over the years, the capital backlog is so much that there is no way HUD is able to provide the capital needs for the industry, other than we entering into public-private partnerships to make sure the portfolio is up and running and we can preserve affordable housing.
Right, and if we had not entered into this agreement, the housing stock would have continued to deteriorate.
Definitely.
Right, and the quality of life for people would have deteriorated. So really, the people who are protesting or critics should be reaching out to members of Congress and saying, give housing authorities the funding that they need. So if you don't like this private-public, partnership, if you had all the money you need, then you could continue to do what you're doing and have total control. But right now, you don't have that option.
Yes.
That's basically it. So in a nutshell, none of the people are being relocated temporarily against their will out of the Greenburgh, community, which is something that is not what some people, were alleged. There's a few people who decided to temporarily, permanently move out, which is totally their choice. The last question I have, and I'm sorry that I ask, is a couple months ago, some residents in Ardsley, they were concerned about their kids, and I'm sort of wondering if there's any possibility that you could look at, say, those two Ardsley motels for families with, with children, because that to me would give people an option of staying within the same school district. I'm just wondering, that's just my own.
But isn't it the case that when people are moved temporarily, that the kids remain in the same school district? That the kids are not taken out of the school district to begin with?
Absolutely, and I believe it's McKinney-Vento requires the school
Exactly.
district to provide transportation
Yes.
wherever the kids are, the children are. And to Mr. Finer's point, we've talked about this, and we're certainly, in terms of it's not really conducive to comfortable living arrangements to move families into a motel when there's no kitchen arrangements or anything of that nature. So the Housing Action Council is working to move them to the most comfortable temporary accommodations possible.
Okay. I was just, I was speaking to some parents, who have kids in the school district, and, that was an option that I thought at least could be, considered. People may decide that they want the federal sites and the state sites are not that far away from the school district anyway, and you're just talking about a couple months, so it's not a big deal. I'm just trying to respond to the calls that I've gotten in the past, couple months. But, I thought this has been really very helpful for me.
All right, and just, we are working with the transportation departments in the school district, and all the children will be transported by buses to where they need to go. So,
Would you give us, while you're here, just like a little update on the status of the senior housing and the construction, when you think people would be
Just
moving
before you move there, I just want to stay on this topic really quickly. Can you just clarify, there was some concern for residents about the private partnership that you guys have entered into? If you can just really explain that again and just explain what that partnership is.
so
so they have some clarity on it.
With respect to the scattered sites,
Yes.
former scattered sites? The scattered site development is being funded through a combination of debt from an institutional investor as well as equity from a tax credit investor under the Section 42 of the Internal Revenue Code. And with respect to the equity investor invests dollars into the project in return for the ability to get tax credits in the transaction. And of course, the tax credit is only useful to entities that have income, so they can get credits against their tax credit liability. And so in these transactions, the tax credit investor, the equity investor, is part of the partnership. And because that's where the tax credit equity comes from, the equity dollars come from. With respect to these partnerships, in this particular partnership, the housing authority is the developer, the housing authority is the property manager, the housing authority
Sorry.
has never
I'm trying to get this off.
Okay. The housing authority maintains ownership of the land. So the housing authority, as opposed to other projects and other developments, is on all sides of this transaction. And the only reason it's brought in the equity investor is because that's how these transactions are structured. The equity investor, again, brings the equity dollars combined with the institutional investor dollars, allows the project to be financially feasible.
So there was a question, is the Greenburgh Housing Authority is now an LLC?
The Greenburgh Housing Authority is not an LLC.
So can you
The Greenburgh
explain?
okay. The Greenburgh Housing Authority formed two LLCs. Greenburgh Housing, and with respect to the scattered site, Greenburgh Heights Managers LLC, which is the managing member of Greenburgh Heights LLC. Greenburgh Heights LLC is actually the owner of the developer. So the structure of Greenburgh Heights LLC is that you have the equity investor on one side, who has a 99.99% interest with respect to the economic interest, which is required by the Internal Revenue Code to allow it to get the tax credits. And then you have the managing member, which is Greenburgh Heights Managers LLC, which is solely owned by Greenburgh Housing Authority.
Okay. Got it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is that it?
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening,
Thanks
everyone.
all.